What is the most disturbing thing to know? Please don't forget to subscribe and like. Flies don't have teeth. So, when they land on your sandwich and want to eat some, they barf up the contents of their stomach, often containing another animal's shit, so the digestive enzymes can get on the food and then they eat. F you man, I'm just gonna pretend they have teeth. There are 32 missing nuclear weapons, and those are only the ones that we know of. This reminds me of that old man that last month was found to have a missing, and still working, WW2 Nazi tank in its backyard, which he used to shovel snow in the winter. All those bombs are probably in someone's abandoned barn or something. Maybe at the bottom of the sea too. Often, burnt bodies are found in the same stance, known as the boxer pose, due to muscles contracting from heat. It's an incredibly disturbing looking thing. I first heard about it from my grandfather that fought in Burma. During the war he was present at a Burmese funeral in which the cadaver was burnt on a pyre. Just as the flames began to singe the corpse, it sat up straight. The Burmese, of course, got a good laugh out of the British soldiers collectively shitting themselves, as contractions due to heat during cremation is apparently rather common. Doesn't make it any less creepy. This is why when we Hindus cremate our dead we pile logs on top of them. Grandpa ain't sitting up straight with 100 kilos of dead wood on him. Cyanide poisoning is an incredibly painful way to die. Cyanide was what Jonestown consumed for mass suicide. Parents were instructed to give it to their children and convinced the crying was just fear. Edit, for those asking about how cyanide works. If memory serves from when I first read this and listen to the audio recordings, it feels like a massive heart attack. It may not have taken too much time, but any time greater than instant is too long to suffer before death. I'm reminded of the fact that Jim Jones had someone shoot him in the head. Coward couldn't drink the poison he forced those people and their babies to take, and couldn't even pull the trigger himself. There are guys with a fetish to cut off their penises. There's even a subreddit dedicated to it. I found out about it a few months ago and it still haunts me. Drop the subreddit so we can avoid it while you're avoiding them. Be sure to also avoid subreddits such as r/coprofiles or r/prolapseville. Why did I click that? The horrendous practice of having a dancing boy, aka slave in some regions of Afghanistan and Pakistan. When families are poor they will sell their child to be a dancing boy. The children are frequently killed if they resist. It's a rough watch, but the documentary The Dancing Boys of Afghanistan covers this awful practice pretty well. I knew a person in the military who had to work with some Afghan people who had a dancing boy and the Americans couldn't do anything about it. Pelicans are some of the most demonic birds in existence, if not some of the most demonic creatures. Pelicans will go into other birds' nests, shove the parents out of the nest. They will then swallow babies whole, fly back to their own nests, and regurgitate the still half-alive, partially digested babies, to their own babies for them to consume. Some pelicans are literally raised on the partially digested, living flesh of other baby birds. Fun fact: pelicans started eating birds because the fish populations they ate became scarce. It was birds or starvation. Welcome to human depletion of global resources. If you try to grab the brain in its natural state it will fall apart. When you see scientists pick up the brain they have used chemicals to harden it. Also, brains have a gross, greasy smell. When I got the chance to hold a human brain I was surprised at the weight of it. At an average of 3 pounds. 1.5 kilograms. It wasn't heavy at all, but also not as light as I thought it would be. For some reason I expected it to be more spongy and light and not so dense. If you get fresh brains on your clothes, it leaves a grease stain that never seems to wash out. Talk about a suspicious comment. One aspect of foster care. Some people will take their child to a doctor. Child gets diagnosed with cancer. Child goes to first appointment. Kid gets wheeled back for treatment. Parents then leave, go home, pack and disappear. The kid is in the treatment waiting room, waiting for parents that will never ever come, sick and facing death alone. It doesn't happen a lot but enough to have processes in place. The worst is when they're like 4, although a 7-year-old was also rough. Edit. Whoa, lots of comments, so we'll try and go through some. Also, it's biological parents that abandon them at the hospital, but foster parents do too, especially if the first foster parents are relatives that were strongly asked to foster. I worked with a child that this happened to. I work for child safety. She was in hospital with a brain tumor for a year, relearning how to eat, talk, and walk, all alone. If the child comes out of it, how do you even live after this? Knowing full well that your parents literally abandoned you to die and vanished. The CPR dummy face template is based on a dead 16-year-old girl's face. Her body was pulled from the River Seine in the 1880s and her cause of death and identity were never discovered. A mortician was so entranced by her peaceful expression that he made a plaster mask of her, which became the face of CPR dummies and health training equipment. So hundreds of millions of people have kissed the face of an anonymous dead girl in the last 150 years. Not gonna lie, there's something grimly comforting about that. To think that a girl who would have otherwise been lost to history has indirectly saved lives, like the one she once briefly lived, is weirdly heartwarming. Perhaps she has saved others from her own fate. One of Mayhem's band members committed suicide. When he was found by his bandmate, pictures were taken and it became the new album cover. The photographer was subsequently murdered by Varg Vikernes, who masterminded church burnings. Dawn of the Black Hearts is actually a live bootleg. Doesn't make it any less disturbing though. Don't forget Burzum collected bits of his skull and gave them as gifts. Pretty sure pictures were used for an album cover as well. I forget what it's called, but sometimes the artery that runs right next to your esophagus, over years of recurrent acid reflux, can rupture. It fills your stomach with blood in seconds, which causes you to vomit, which causes more damage. It fills you up with blood so fast that it eventually fills your lungs. This takes maybe a minute or two and is almost always fatal unless it happens to occur while you're in a hospital. Your last few minutes alive are spent vomiting pints of blood and then drowning in it. P.S. I searched so you don't have to. It's called gastrointestinal bleeding.